Welcome to the Remote Works Podcast. I'm Jonathan Sharp, and I'm here with my friend and co-host, Ari Winokur, and we're excited to kick off this inaugural episode. So we'll jump right into it. And Ari, why don't you give them just a brief background of where you're coming from?
Well, sure. I'm off the east coast of the U.S. here. I've been there my whole life, and I've been working a lot for the past 10, 15 years mostly in sysadmin, done a little web development as well on the side, and looking to try to get into the remote world. Right now, I'm working more in the office world.
Well, I kind of come from the other perspective. I've been working remote for about 8 years now, and moved during that time. My background is in computer science and web development, more specifically. But I've been an entrepreneur for a couple of years and had an experience of running a remote team, in addition to being remote. And currently I live in northern Wisconsin, way far north, almost to the Michigan border, and live in kind of the rural area. So that's an aspect of working remote that I'll bring in this perspective. So kind of our first question is, who is this podcast for?
Well, we're really looking to cover a good range here. We're looking at all the people doing all kinds of remote work. You got freelancers, contractors, you got people working full-time at a company, just working not in an office. And you got the types of entrepreneurs, which might be a freelancer, might be something bigger, and not necessarily working in a traditional office setting, I think is where we're going here. But we're looking for all of the whole range of it. And, working from different locations too, I think is something that you have a bit more of an interesting experience on.
So kind of breaking these down a little bit, because we mentioned a lot of really good stuff here in terms of the types of engagement for remote work. So there, as we were kind of brainstorming before this episode, there were 4 of them that really kind of came into play. The first is kind of a freelancer. Second is more contract-based work. And then you get into full-time work, which is kind of more your traditional employment. And then finally, an entrepreneur, which is more of a product-based business or more of the self-employed, but not in the traditional sense. So as far as a freelancer, I had that experience when I first started out. For the first probably almost year, I was doing freelance work, which was a lot of project-based work, some hourly work here and there, but for a large variety of clients. And it was an exciting time, to say the least. I learned a heck of a lot. And then contract work is kind of the next progression with that. And you have fewer clients, but it's more consistent work. And usually in the remote workspace, with the contract, you have the flexibility of your schedule and understanding what needs to get done. And then full-time, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, full-time. Full-time work is an interesting thing because there are different companies. As I'm someone who's looking to try to break into this remote working world, I've looked at jobs that require a set schedule. You need to be at your computer from this time to this time. We don't care where you are, but you need to be in front of your computer working. And there's also the full-time employees who simply say, hey, come on, show up, get the work done. We don't care when. It's usually, I find it's more customer service support type work that requires that so-called 9 to 5 type thing, or a midnight shift or other types of hours. They don't really care, again, where you are because you're working at a computer. They just want you to be able to cover a certain time slot. So there's definitely within the full-time world, that's one of the things about a remote work, because you're working, say, from home or wherever else you might be. You can just sit down, open up your computer, connect to the internet, and go to work whenever that time suits you or suits the employer, depending on the arrangement.
And so really kind of the one common theme throughout this, what we're talking about here, is the fact that location is really secondary to the work being performed. And the fact that your team is also very possibly not co-located, that everything that you're doing is over an internet connection in terms of communication, and the types of applications that you're using to collaborate, which is really a major shift in the way that work has been done since the beginning of time, almost. Where we had communication in terms of letters and packages and telegrams and that type of thing. So work was done over distances, but this is more real-time collaboration over great distances.
The big thing is it's getting away from the idea of having a butt in a seat, so to speak, from one time to one time. It's, the full time might still be, you need to be from this time to this time, but your boss doesn't actually need to see you walk into the office and sit down in that chair. Mm-hmm. They just need to know that you're connected in and doing the work, whatever that work is.
And that's a very different management style too, because in some environments that I've worked before, really your presence was more important than your output or what you were actually delivering.
Sure.
And I would say my experience has been, since working remote, for me personally in my development, the emphasis has really shifted more towards output than presence. And especially with the fact that over these last 8 years or so, I've had a fairly flexible schedule. And I keep regular 9 to 5 hours, but I do have some freedom in that. And so if I need to take off for an appointment, I'll go do that. But the understanding that I have with myself really and the contracts I work on is that the results will be delivered. So I'm going to jump ahead here to this last type of engagement, which is, I would say, more of a non-traditional one on top of that, and that's being an entrepreneur. And, I think when people think of entrepreneur and being on the internet, snake oil is sometimes mentioned.
Sure.
Because there are a lot of products out there. The work from home and all you got to do is stuff envelopes or that type of thing, which was a common job.
Right.
But really there's a whole range of entrepreneurs today that are working remote. Everything from YouTube stars that really broke into the space by having a great personality and a great product, to those that offer up services and are able to leverage that for scale and growth.
Right. You definitely have that large variety in the entrepreneurial field. And it's the great thing being an entrepreneur. If you want to, then, often you start out, it's just you, maybe a partner. Your partner doesn't have to be near you if you talk about it from a remote perspective. Your partner could be anywhere else in the world. And then going out from there, you just need to build out your company. As long as you find somebody who's good to work with, you can hire them. Doesn't matter where they are either. And you just can grow your company in so much more ways so it's great from an entrepreneur's perspective. It saves so much on having to worry about finding people in your area or possibly even relocating your business to where you can find lots of people that can do the jobs you need.
And that was kind of my experience. For 2.5 years, I had co-founded a consulting company with another developer. And what you were describing is really exactly what our experience was. He lived in another state and different from mine. And it started out with the two of us. And over the year and a half, 18 months that followed, we grew from the two of us up to a team of about 23. And we were in 15 different states and a couple different countries, all working remote. And we really had no office per se. Really our expenses were payroll, and that was pretty much it. So there were definitely challenges being that distributed, but overall it was really a phenomenal experience, and a really an opportunity that wouldn't have existed probably 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah, definitely. That all the options out there, make it so wonderful. The fact again that you can do that, and I think that kind of brings us to another interesting point, which is that we've been talking a bit about working from home, but not everybody that does this remote work works from their home. Some people, maybe you'll spend a little time just getting out of the house too. You might work in a coffee shop for a while. So there are co-working spaces where people can go.
Yeah.
A lot of, mostly freelancers, but also a lot of these remote workers will go to where you just are working on your own at a desk, but you're working surrounded by other people who are also doing, their own thing. Some people go to a library.
Yeah.
And then some people take advantage of this remote ability, especially if they have flexible hours, and they travel. So they'll spend a week in one city and then a week in another city. And I'm not just talking about in the U.S. sometimes. I'm talking people who travel the world doing this.
Mm-hmm. That aspect of it is really fascinating to me. I'm at the stage and season of life where I have roots down. I have a 8-year-old daughter and another one on the way. And so global traveling is more logistically challenging, but just being online and following people on Twitter and Instagram and such, it's very possible to see these worldwide travelers, and they will travel literally year round and stay a couple weeks from place to place. And there are actually even communities that cater to helping facilitate this.
Yes.
And helping people work out the logistics. And there's communities where you can go and stay in a house with other digital nomads for a couple weeks on end, or even a couple months.
Sure, there's all kinds of programs for digital nomads out there. I know there are some people that are working through a program where they're literally going around the world in a year, from city to city, Mm-hmm. But, even on the points of families, there are some people who are traveling with children either around the U.S. or even around the world.
Yeah.
Now, I know, myself having my 6.5-year-old as well, and you having your 8-year-old, maybe it's not for me or you, or maybe it's not for our wives. I don't know. But
yeah,
either way, we've set down some kind of roots ourselves. But there's people who will go ahead and do this. And, hopefully we'll have an opportunity to chat with them in future episodes and find out just how they managed to pull this kind of thing off.
So one kind of keystone thing to this whole experience really is the need for connectivity, and really the ability to connect to the internet, to conduct your work in commerce and that type of thing. And one of the opportunities that has emerged as rural broadband has increased and become more prevalent is the opportunity for really rural remote working.
Yeah.
Which is kind of my story right now. When I first started out working remote, I was living in Omaha, Nebraska, and there was great connectivity there. We were in a suburb basically, and was a large enough city. But now we're in rural, remote Wisconsin, where our town has about 1,500 people in it, and broadband's a little bit more challenging, but it's good enough that we were able to move back here to be closer to my wife's family.
Sure. Did you get a traffic light yet?
We still do not have a traffic light, just a stop sign.
Now that just puts, I think, in perspective for our listeners, just what kind of rural life you're living right now.
Yeah. And I think just one more tidbit of information is we're probably about 45 minutes from the closest Walmart, which we look at as a real blessing. You can't get much more rural than being living with no street light and yet being that kind of distance from a Walmart. Yep. It gets a lot more lonely the further out we go. And I guess one other point to mention is that internet connectivity did dictate where we located to up here. We are in town per se, even though it's a small town, to get the cable internet. And I have both a cable and DSL connection, just for reliability and redundancy purposes. But yeah, it's still a neat opportunity. Looking at kind of the main reasons for going remote, what is the purpose and the desire behind this to pursue remote work? And I think there's a number of one. For me, the one thing that I was looking at the most was to be closer to my family. And I went remote 2 weeks after my daughter was born, which looking back was an absolutely crazy thing to do. And I may have been sleep deprived when I made that decision, but it worked out. So what are some other ones that you can?
Well, yeah, I mean, family plays a big role for my choice too. I've worked some jobs where I've been out of the house for, over 12 hours a day between the commute and the office time. And, that goes to the other thing is commute. Where you are located. I mean, if you wanted to live in such a rural area like you're talking about, and you want to get to work doing your development work in a, this is real tech work in an office and working for a business where you have to go to an office. I don't know. I mean, at 45 minutes to a Walmart, how long are we talking to any kind of company that actually does that kind of work? Another hour?
Yeah. Oh, there are a few, but when you look at compensation and that type of thing, it's not. It's still a real challenge. And that's actually one thing that my wife and I talked about when we moved up here is this was kind of going all in for remote work. I mean, like most guys and most people in the profession, I do whatever it takes to provide for our family. Right. But at the same time, introducing a commute of at least an hour, and we do get snow up here from time to time, so that adds some complexity to it.
Yeah, just for just since you mentioned the commute being affected by weather, just for our listeners' perspective, where exactly are you located?
We are northwest of Green Bay by about 2.5 hours. So it's in a town of 3 lakes because we have 3 lakes in our town.
Now that's a rural life when you start naming towns like that too, isn't it?
Yeah.
And but yeah, I mean, I think people associate Green Bay with being a cold, snowy place. So if you're north of there, I think that sets a tone. One of the things we're talking about is you cutting that commute out. In addition to that, since you're working from home or from wherever your computer and internet connection is, the opportunities increase because now you can go and get a job working for a company. Yeah. Let's say even the whole company isn't distributed across the whole area, but you could work for a company, on the West Coast where you're living on the East Coast or in the Midwest. Yeah. And that whole flexibility now where I can just say, I've applied for some jobs recently working for a company based out of San Francisco, a company based out of New York, and I'm based out of Maryland. Yeah. So the flexibility of opportunities is huge.
It really is. And I think the other thing that I've come to find is that some of the more interesting jobs are remote. And it's one of the more progressive things that companies are embracing. And likewise, they're doing so to be able to connect with that talent because that talent isn't always local to where they're at. And when you look at the cost of relocation for the organization paying for it or providing it, as well as the family that has to pick up and move, it's a huge hurdle and really one that they're able to better embrace with remote.
Yeah, definitely that whole flexibility, when you talk about that, it goes back to the family thing too. You don't have to uproot your family or from another side, some people relocate to a certain area because either a spouse or somebody's in school and, you finish big school like, even take, especially something like say a medical school or something like this, then you have to go find a residency somewhere else in the country. This way, you can stick with that great job opportunity you found and just when your spouse or significant other has to move across the country, you can just go ahead and pick up and move and just keep on working for that same company. And that's, it's better for the company and it's better for you.
So I guess one question that we could ask is like, based on prior experience of going remote, do you think that this is something that you have to learn?
I found it's come naturally to me, but something which we didn't really touch on is remote is really expanding beyond the tech world. We keep talking about sitting in front of your computer and doing work, and the computer and the internet connection are huge. Yeah, but really, I've been looking out there at some interesting jobs that have popped up I think one of the airlines, I can't remember now, maybe you can look it up quickly here, it has been outsourcing their customer service to remote people. I know.
I could be wrong on it, but I think it was Delta almost.
I thought it was JetBlue, but I wasn't sure.
Well, it's one of those.
It's probably one of those. Anyhow, there's also the I think it was Nordstrom was hiring also customer service workers to to handle incoming calls to their call center. Instead of having an actual call center, they were going to hire people, fly them out, train them, and then send them home and let them work from home doing doing the work, instead of bringing everybody in and having everybody come into this huge call center, which I've worked in a call center, these big cube farms where everybody's talking around you. It's bad enough sometimes for some people have experienced cube farms. When you've got everybody muttering on the phone around you because that's their job, it can be distracting sometimes. So if you can get a nice quiet space in your house and you can sit down and you can handle customers' issues, if that's the kind of job you want to do, that's so much better I think for everybody.
Yeah. Well, I think you make a great point there with that. It's not just tech focused now. And I think even online, you've seen traditionally jobs and opportunities that have been on location, like personal trainers, for example, that have now had the ability to transition their business to the web. And so now they're remote virtual trainers.
Sure.
Which, that really expands opportunity. And I think if you take even, more traditional services and look at how you could apply it in a remote setting, your opportunity increases so great.
I just quickly did a Google here, and there's actually 5 different airlines that are doing some kind of telecommuting work for their customer service and such things, and JetBlue and Delta are both on the list. So there you go.
There we go. We were both right.
So, but you were talking about from that whole health perspective, the personal trainer. I knew somebody training for a marathon. They trained to run the New York City Marathon. Unfortunately, it was the year of Hurricane Sandy, and that got canceled.
Ooh.
But nonetheless, throughout the experience, they had a coach that they paid for to help them through in terms of their eating and their running and how they were doing it, all the kind of stuff you had to do to learn how to pace yourself and eat properly to be ready for that kind of big run. And you know what? That person wasn't there with them, watching them run, watching what they're eating, talking to them. The person was in some other state. So there's that. And you have the personal trainers that come to your house and work out with you. I've even heard people doing the portable gym idea now, where a personal trainer has a gym inside the back of some kind of van or truck, drives it over, helps you through a workout, and then drives off to the next customer. Remote comes in all shapes and forms.
It really does. And I actually kind of like that example. That means that you're not going to buy a piece of exercise equipment that you won't use.
Right. You go and you hire the guy. The guy comes to you. The guy or the gal comes to you, does the workout with you, and leaves. And you don't have to go ahead and buy anything. I mean, unless you want to continue doing the workout on your own. It's good for somebody like me who probably wouldn't use it unless the personal trainer was there.
Yeah, I think I would need that level of motivation also. So, well, I think as we're getting closer to wrapping up this segment of our inaugural episode here, talking about kind of books, knowledge, and more, are there any books that you would recommend on this topic?
So when I first started getting interested in remote work, one of the first companies that piqued my interest in the whole thing, because I was working a lot in getting into the web development, specifically working with WordPress, there was a great book, which unfortunately I don't have in front of me, so I can't remember the author's full name. first name is Scott. The book is A Year Without Pants. We'll make sure when we get the show notes together that his name is in there. But, Year Without Pants was a very interesting perspective on going in and working. Scott was someone who had worked for big companies like Microsoft, and then he went contract/freelance kind of world, doing management consulting, really. And he had been working with the company Automatic behind WordPress.com. Another book which I've actually recently picked up and very much excited to start reading is a book called Remote. Can't get more simple than that.
No, it's almost a keystone book, or one of the first ones that you should start at. And I believe it originally came out in 2013, so it's a couple years old now.
I thought it was older, but but the concept behind it itself is incredible, because it's written by two guys who I think started the company. What was it? 37 Signals was the original name of the company. They've changed the name since.
Yeah, I believe it's Basecamp.
I believed
now.
Something else. Yes, I believe that's what they did. They went with Basecamp because that was their main product too. Don't get scared off. These books are not management books. So if you're not looking to be a manager, if you're just looking to try to look at remote work and what it's all about and how people go remote and what kind of experiences there are, these books are actually excellent books for all those levels, not just for the manager. What about you? You have any books, blogs?
Yeah, those were kind of the two keystone ones that I've been following the most. So in closing of this inaugural episode, we appreciate you listening, and you can follow us online at the Remote Works Podcast website, which is remote.works. And we got links there to our Twitter and Instagram, as well as an email list to receive the updates. And be sure to subscribe and leave a comment in the iTunes podcast.
Yeah, and let's not forget also, we have a Slack community, which we can actually thank Jonathan for having started originally. Now, Jonathan, where else online can people find you?
So I am on Twitter at JD Sharp and also Instagram. And those are probably the two places that I'm most active these days.
I'm able to be found as Ari Winokur on pretty much anywhere on the internet. Please go out, find us, hit us up, talk to us, and we'd be happy to chat with all of you out there. And we hope to see you somewhere out there and somewhere in the Slack community too.
And finally, I like to tell my daughter every day when I drop her off at school, go be awesome. And that's complete with a fist bump. She's in the 3rd grade now. So I'd like to say the same to you. Go forth and be awesome. Thanks you for listening. This is the Remote Works Podcast. This podcast is a production and copyright of Cultivate Now. All rights reserved.